Welcome to the second episode of Kontrarian Korner. My name is Ben Kellerin. Today we have the pleasure of having Phil Gibson on as a guest. I found his stuff through Tom Luongo and was interested in some of the stuff he's been writing on his Substack titled QPOL, The Quiet Part Out Loud. But it's an interesting look at Fed policy, what's going on with Jamie Dimon, Jerome Powell, all those different things. So wanted to have him on and chat with him about what he's seeing with the Federal Reserve, where interest rates might be going, how current events impact all that, and anything else he might be paying attention to. So, Phil, thanks for coming on.
Ben, thanks for having me, man. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so I guess it'd be a good place to start with your big picture view on the Federal Reserve, what's going on with Powell, and all these different things. I know that your Twitter handle is Powell is my pal. So that might be a unpopular opinion for a lot of Fed haters, but I think there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that might be interesting to chat about. So maybe if you want to dive into that, that'd be a good place to start.
Indeed, I love making zero hedge squirm and all the other naysayers. But, well, I guess I'd be the naysayer in that case. But the short and skinny of it is higher for longer, baby. That's what Powell's heading towards. Eventually, he's going to cut. Yeah, that's what a Fed chair does. He raises rates and lowers rates. The main difference, if anyone else is a Luongan or student of Tom Luongo, I'll claim that I coined Luongan. I haven't heard it anywhere else. People that try it Luongonian just doesn't work. But higher for longer is basically Powell do monetary policy on his watch, and he'll lower rates on his watch. He hasn't yet. People thought that he was going to pivot at 1% and break everything, and he probably won't pivot until he does break something. And just like Silicon Valley Bank, FTX, I think that those were hit jobs on the Fed. He raised rates from the get-go to punish the bad actors that only existed under ZIRP, zero interest rate policy. Ben Bernanke, Janet Yellen after him. I guess we could point the finger at Greenspan, but he wasn't all bad from the beginning. He ran in Ayn Rand's circle. He was a gold bug, and I guess you slowly get decrepit and corrupted like Emperor Palpatine in Star Wars if you are in the system too much, or if you have a certain clan of people breathing down your back. But regardless, that's pretty much where things are going. I think that we're starting to see the housing market slow down, everything else slow down. I can't recall the exact number, but CPI didn't come off as bad as people planned. And the markets, to me, just are still in denial about that Powell's gonna pivot, especially in election year. The best thing for him to do is not pivot until after the election, I think, or because what you're doing essentially is when you're raising rates, and I write about this is like the main thing. If you go to article 1 that I wrote on QPOL, it's called "It's Not About Inflation, Stupid." And then you can also read the oh my gosh, what was it called? It wasn't called Fighting Against Giants. I'll have Ben put the links in the show notes if y'all want. But the fracturing of the big club. It's not all one big club, and we ain't in it. There are factions within the club. You have arguably they kind of wear the white hat of like sovereigntist America firsters, and then you have globalists that have been, just not working in the best interest of America. They're traders. So basically, raising interest rates bankrupts their money. It destroys the offshore dollar market. If not destroys it, it puts the offshore dollar market in the control of the Federal Reserve, because beforehand, all those offshore dollars and everybody's debt was indexed to LIBOR, which was a City of London rate decided arbitrarily. And as I agree with Tom, we didn't really have a true American independence, like Declaration of Independence, until we gave the bird to the City of London and we divorced ourselves from LIBOR and re-indexed all of our new U.S. domestic debt to SOFR, the secure overnight financing rate. And that is basically debt that is U.S. domestic. It's based off of something real, tangible, actual market activity between primary dealers within the United States. And that's what makes it secure. Now, could they be making like handshake deals and be giving themselves preferential treatment on how much they're borrowing between each other in the repo markets? Like, sure, whatever. But I just think that it's based on something real. In the past decade, when they try to pass SOFR through, it always got its wrist slapped, whether it be by Obama or whatever globalist was in charge, or constituents were backing whoever was in charge. But that's basically where we're at. Jerome Powell's been doing an America First monetary policy, and there's a lot that goes into that. I agree with Tom that it's all started on June 2021 after the FOMC meeting, and also after the Green Swan global list banker meetup conference they did on Zoom, where Christine Lagarde was talking about climate change and this and that. And she was asking Powell and kind of shaming him lightly about what the Fed's views on climate change was. And Jerome Powell, as he always says, is that Fed's got to do a mandate. Climate change is important and will make adjustments as we see fit, basically. He takes a politer rhetoric rather than how we saw Jamie Dimon say, I think, in winter of 2022, where he stood up against Rashid Tlaib when she was basically bitching to all the banker CEOs from Wall Street about how you're not, green enough, and shaming Jamie Dimon why they're not divesting from oil, because he literally said, because that would pave the road to hell to America. You and I off camera were talking about how important coal and shale and all this stuff is, and how much of a demand that there's been because of ESG for the past 15 years, I think you said, and it's here to stay. I don't know much about peak oil. I've heard it's bullshit, and I will just kind of run with that gut feeling. That is the case. There's plenty of energy out there for us to use. We could probably have been further advanced in renewable energy and more efficient energy, but the powers that be with their red tape don't let us. But we basically have a faction of nationalists. See, I don't even want to say that, because they're down with having a foreign policy that isn't really weaponizing the dollar against the global south or the BRICS nations or whatever. So nationalism in the sense where we have international cooperation with each other and we're not trying to take the world island. That's the Brits game, and we still have Brit traitors in our government, unfortunately, and other Davos oligarchs. So long story short, and maybe seen as too optimistic, but the more that we can drain these people of their euro dollars, the less money that they have to cover revolutions, overthrow governments, steal our elections. And what Powell was kind of doing is paving the new road with golden train tracks of basically the plumbing of monetary policy. I don't know how this works, but from what I'm kind of taking is once it's done, it can't be undone. Something like SOFR. And yes, did I learn all this stuff from Tom? I did. But I will say, last year, I had a shower epiphany thinking about SOFR and what he... I had the idea of because SOFR, let's step back a little bit. But basically, you have 12 different districts within the economy, and they have somewhat different monetary policy or how they kind of run things, like the cheapness of debt or not. The best example that I can say of this is that the San Francisco Fed's the largest Fed district, in that 20 states out of the country all abide by the monetary policy of that district. So that's nearly half the country. And as we've heard, dumb policy starts west, is birthed there, and then gradually moves eastward towards the rest of the country. And so it takes an outfit like Silicon Valley, where they have lobbyists going to, when Janet Yellen was president of the Dallas Fed. I mean, they're dovish, they're liberal commies, and you basically have the San Francisco Fed and their lobbyists trying to you have Silicon Valley Bank having their lobbyists lobbying the San Francisco Fed for a bank charter so they can have this bullshit neobank bank these bullshit tech companies that shouldn't exist in the first place under zero interest rate policy. So you basically have these companies that shouldn't exist to begin with parking their deposits at Silicon Valley Bank. That's how Silicon Valley Bank is making their money. And they have all these treasuries on their balance sheet, and they don't expect an environment of ZERP ever again. And that all changes when the Fed starts raising rates. And it's a domino effect of all these bullshit zombie companies collapsing on each other and basically sending Silicon Valley Bank tits up and everyone that uses them. Me, for one, because the last place that I worked at banked with SVB. And when they went down, they got rid of like 90% of us. So
Yeah.
here, but
I was just going to jump in and say, I think there's a lot of things that happen with 0% interest rates and that policy that would not happen if there's actual cost of money.
exactly.
And so, like you said, when you have Yellen at the San Francisco Fed and all these different things going on, it's just one of those things that, like, you wonder if Tesla or you wonder if Uber, if that stuff is here today, if we don't have basically a decade of ZERP. And I think one of the things that I wanted to ask about is one of the things you said.
I had a point. I kind of went on the tangent of the SF Fed, but my point is these golden train tracks that Powell's laying down, and this goes back to my shower epiphany that I derail myself from explaining. Hi, rails, train tracks. I'm doing puns here. Did not mean to. I'm like, okay, well, that's not how the system should work. You have 12 regional Fed banks. So each regional Fed bank should kind of represent the economy of that region of the country, right? Like debt shouldn't cost as much in San Francisco as it does in fucking Ohio. I don't know, right? That only makes sense because they have different economies. So how they should work, basically my epiphany to Tom was, hey, well, if SOFR is like this new thing and it's being represented by market activity domestically in the U.S., why can't SOFR just replace the Fed funds rate? And he's just like, well, that's actually an interesting point, Phil, because Martin Armstrong talks about the 12 regional Fed banks within the country, and you basically have like this decentralized monetary system in a way, because there's no one like central bank monolith, and the shareholders of the Fed are the Wall Street banks and probably the 12 district banks. Don't quote me on that. I'm probably wrong. I'm not always right on shit. But anyway, it's my theory that SOFR can potentially replace the Fed funds rate. And to the point where maybe this means that we can actually have true price discovery of each unique economy within the country. It's kind of free market-ish. And these are the kind of policies that I think once set in stone, like we can't go back, right? Like we're not going to get off SOFR to something else, right? We just ditched LIBOR. And it's just really interesting to think about. Maybe this like true price discovery thing is how we fix the economy. Because as Danielle DiMartino Booth, who is a favorite of mine, when she was on Vivek's podcast last year, she talked about this idea of private debt issuers being able to actually make deals in the market when all the private equity dudes go bankrupt because rates went up and all their treasuries were underwater and this and that. And so really it's Jerome Powell ripping the Band-Aid off and putting a new monetary policy golden train track band-aid on, and we can't really go back, right? We ditched LIBOR, we're on SOFR. SOFR is being backed by real market activity, and it might also, shoehorn us into price discovery in all markets and might set a new standard of what the cost of debt is going to be. I would love to ban usury altogether, but
I think
I'm
we're
a
a ways
realist.
away from that. I think
Yeah,
that'll take some time. But
I'm a realist. These realizations are the why I'm not a fucking like Bitcoin maximalist anymore. The Fed doesn't print money; the Treasury does, and the Treasury forces them to monetize it. And yeah, the balance sheet's huge, but we're having quantitative tightening. Now there's less QT now. Some people said that was a pivot. I think that's bullshit because we're still doing it and Powell still hasn't lowered rates. And I think that we can actually expect 25 bip hike next year because we'll fucking need it. So that's kind of where I see things going. And I'll have you redirect from here.
yeah, the one of the things I wanted to ask about is kind of your opinion on what happens from here until the election. Because when I was looking at some of the stuff getting priced in at the end of last year, where people are talking about, oh, there's going to be 7 rate cuts in 2024, I was like, good luck with that. Because I mean, the way I kind of look at big picture is that we're in for an inflationary decade, and there's going to be peaks and valleys. It's going to go up and down, but overall, I think there's enough evidence. I think there's going to be inflation that's higher on average, and right now we're sitting around 3 something on the CPI. If anyone still believes that to be an accurate gauge of inflation, but I wouldn't be surprised if we start heading higher over the next several months to later this year. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on the path from here to the election as far as potential for a rate cut. Some people have started to float the idea of a rate hike. I wouldn't be surprised if it stays level from here, honestly, until the election, but wouldn't mind hearing your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's really anyone's guess. I think the best guess is that Powell just stays where he's at. I think he'd like to raise. If he does, maybe I don't know, because people were arguing when Danielle said that, by June, like the mid marker, that would be like the politically kosher thing to do, like middle of the year. Any time before that would be in favor of the Democrats. Anytime after that would, the closer that you get to election when you raise or cut, the closer to the election that you have to make a change in monetary policy, the worse it is for the left in winning. And I think that's just like enough like financing, campaigning time. I really don't know how this shit works. But I think the most dovish thing he can do is like cut. I don't think that will happen. I think that he'll stay the course and just keep him raised where they are. I would like him to raise before the election just to, stab and twist that knife deeper in that wound and the globalists trying to take over a country even more so than they have. And maybe he like cuts QT even like lower than what he already did. I forget the exact numbers. It was close to like 100 billion of QT. That's for anyone that doesn't know. That's just assets on the Fed's balance sheet, like not being renewed, like refinances. They're just gone. Like the debt was serviced, gone. That's less shit off the balance sheet. I think that he's that Powell since he's started doing QT. I like removed a total of like close to 12 trillion of QT. Don't quote me on that, but that's a number I heard recently.
It wouldn't have been that much. I think it was
Or like,
the
isn't it
Fed
just
balance
under
sheet's
it?
gone down a bit, but it's not. It hasn't been a
Maybe
huge
that's like a
amount.
goal, like a realistic goal. Then I don't know. Regardless,
Yeah, I'd have to look at it. I'm not an expert on financial plumbing either, but the
yeah,
one of the things I think is interesting as far as long-term path for interest rates and all this stuff is some of the stuff that I've been hearing about potentially putting gold on the yield curve
yep,
and how that might play out. Like one of the things that's started to get me paying closer attention to all this stuff where you have the financial plumbing and talking about rates going up, rates going down. tightening, easing, all this stuff. I mean, I think all roads basically lead to inflation, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on what happens if we go down this path and we decide, hey, to get people to buy the bonds, we're going to need to put gold on the yield curve and incentivize people to actually buy some of these assets that would otherwise be toxic. So.
Yeah, that's exactly what that is. This is Judy Shelton's idea. I forget what podcast that she went on that was like behind the paywall last year, but one of Tom's patrons mentioned it and like got leaked. But basically, Judy Shelton had this idea of like long duration debt, like 30 or they would issue 50-year bonds, and basically a percentage of the coupon of that bond would be paid in bullion. I think they could also do this with Bitcoin. I saw a recent article that CME is actually going to allow like spot Bitcoin, like actual real Bitcoin, not just like an ETF. And then this also, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around like how basis trading works, but how people are already doing like currency basis like trading swaps. They wouldn't be able to do that with Bitcoin too. So I'm kind of iffy on like whether that's like is bullish. It kind of is if it happened, but if that's also another way for them to suppress the price of Bitcoin from going to the moon or whatever. But regardless, they could more institutional interest is coming into Bitcoin. But going back to the gold on the yield curve thing, what this does is what Powell is doing, monetary policy in general, even the state of the economy and the country, it's all a game of trust, right? Tom argues FDR saved the economy with the FDIC because it could have been much worse if people's money wasn't insured. And so it's a credibility game. And if you have quantitative tightening continue, and if you promise to pay people in gold the interest that they get on their coupons, their treasuries that they buy from the U.S., then there's no reason in the world why foreign interest would just flood the U.S. Because this is the Martin Armstrong idea, right? It's all about capital flow. Where is it going? Kind of watching the euro versus the dollar. If the Dixie's down, it usually kind of floods into, well, one, like our markets, but then if you also see, it's just kind of like, pails of water like being emptied. So dollar up and then down, and then euro kind of goes back up. Maybe even like the latest stimulus package that is sent to Ukraine or Israel, fucking wherever, you might see the euro go up after that because it's just money laundering to bail out Europe because they have no collateral and they're fucking broke and screwed, and they depend on buying second market oil from Russia at a markup. So this is just great. Again, this would I just kind of throw all this under the higher for longer umbrella of Powell's monetary policy idea. So that's basically, I think we kind of covered what gold / Bitcoin on the yield curve would mean. And funny, Book of Cyril, he is a great buddy that I made through Tom's group. He's in one of my private group chats on Twitter and stuff. And he's been on this idea of like, hey, we're going to have a remonetization of gold somehow. Backing the bonds is one way to do it. Also, gold on banks' balance sheets will fill holes on those balance sheets. And we're gradually seeing gold increase in price over time the last couple of years. And I'm not a gold bug. Some people are more gold buggish than I am. And so I'm hoping this isn't like an idealistic pie in the sky thing. I would love for this to happen. I'd love to be wrong about that. So what's funny is that Powell was scheduled to speak at Georgetown University as an alumnus this Sunday. And then today there was news saying that, he can't make it. He got COVID. So he's just going to have like a pre-recorded speech for them to listen to. But people like Book and a couple other people on Twitter were saying, what's he going to say? Is he going to announce the remonetization of gold? I'm like, what the fuck are people coming up with this idea? I mean, it'd be sweet. Like, again, I would love to be wrong, but I don't think he's going to tell a bunch of fucking Zoomers at Georgetown University about gold because they don't give a shit about that. I mean, maybe
They're too
I'm wrong.
busy with GameStop and AMC over the last week. But
Yeah.
as
I mean,
far as
half of them are probably fucking like from India or some shit. I mean, and like the list of speakers, like Powell was the only Anglo on there,
yeah,
from what
no,
I
it's
can tell.
there
So
are a lot of international students, but I guess as far as the gold on the yield curve idea, I'd be curious to hear what you think. Like over the next 3 to 5 years, regardless of what happens with the idea of gold on the yield curve, I think gold is probably going to call it $3,000 to $5,000 an ounce, and this is not some like well researched like technical analysis or anything like that. But I think over the next 3 to 5 years, like people are going to look for safe havens. Gold is one of those, and I think it goes higher. But I think if you get something like gold on the yield curve, I wouldn't be surprised to see it go much higher than that. But that's obviously like a 10 to 20 year type view. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on how high gold goes if we do get that scenario of gold being a partial repayment for bonds in the future.
yeah, totally. And full disclosure, I'm not licensed in anything, no Series 6 or 7. I don't read charts. I hate that shit. Math is not my forte. And so I don't do like forecasts, projections. I don't do like financial forensics on companies, their cash flow and all that shit. But what I can say is that I am relieved that you didn't say some like retarded number like $20,000 for an ounce of gold. That's nice.
I'm
Um,
not Peter Schiff, so you don't have to worry about that.
yeah. So I think what you had said, 5,000, from what I've heard from people, it's like a reasonable number. Because again, what they did is like they are gradually letting it rise because the game of financial musical chairs is over, and banks need to fill the holes on their balance sheet. And before that wasn't. I'm just like speculating here, but that wasn't the case before. And JP Morgan always got the brunt of, oh, they're suppressing and manipulating the price of gold downwards, blah, 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 like blame the bankers. And now the bankers actually need it this time. So, yeah, I'll just agree with your number. I think that's realistic. I don't think it's going to be some pie in the sky, amazing stuff, unless if we have World War III Armageddon. And we don't want that because gold's really the last thing people are going to be thinking about at that time. So,
Yeah. Speaking of World War III stuff going on in the Middle East and Ukraine, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on what's going on over there. If you stay up to date on that or pay a little bit of attention to what's going on over there, I think Ukraine is probably on its last legs. I think the Middle East is a powder keg looking for a spark. I know a lot of people have been more focused on China in recent months, but it seems to me like a lot of stuff is set up to go wrong potentially as far as what could happen in coming months. And it's all in an election year. So it's hard to project what all this stuff could mean, but I think there's a lot of things to keep an eye on. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on any and all of those situations around the world.
yeah, so I'll hit on China because that's the thing I pay the least attention to. So, not much to talk about. I don't buy all the bullshit China neocon FUD. Um, God, what's that one? Um, Peter.
Zihan?
Yeah, fuck him. Uh, all these like CIA just bad actors. Like I have favorite feds, don't get me wrong. But he just sucks. I don't like it. Like it's the same clan of oligarchs that tried to tank Russia in the 90s, and Russia, China, the global south in general. I fully buy into the McKinder Heartland theory of it's the Brits and others that are financing the Brits, namely Rothschilds and whatever other dynasty that came before them. And they are basically trying to take the world island. It is, and these Slavs and Chinese and Orientals and all these other people are in their way. As Tom says, these British and European commie totalitarians just want to make everybody else the help. They want to bankrupt and steal the capital and resources of the United States to do it. It's more nuanced, though, because I buy into that you have more of a European faction, as Tom calls Davos, and then you have the City of London British Empire that never really died out and had sovereignty over the U.S. until SOFR came in. And so they're kind of like at heads with each other. So basically, European Union is more of a Davos idea, and the Brits, as I see it, think that they'll let Davos think that once they achieve that EU totalitarian panopticon, they'll make them think that they're in charge of it. But really, the City of London is, because, I mean, they're the guys that overthrew, did the French Revolution, and, all ties go back to London. I buy into that. I buy into Richard Poe's argument partially, but it's a good argument. And so that's kind of how I see China. I think that George Soros money and whatnot went in as soft power control in like the real estate markets, and just in general, even Bridgewater Capital guy, who's that?
Ray Dalio.
Ray Dalio. Him and other hedge fund guys were sold the idea that, China is going to be the place. And so what China kind of did with Evergrande, I think is an interesting theory that some have, that they did kind of a kabuki theater, self-annihilation, destroying their real estate market, but that also destroyed global soft power control, right? So that's how I kind of see it. I know that their economy, their inflation is kind of fucked, but also through BRICS, with all these other smaller countries and financing them, kind of doing their Confessions of Economic Hitman tactic, EHM tactic. That anyone hasn't read that book, please do. John Perkins, I think the dude's name. I think he just came out with a brand new book too, so that's cool. But
I think an updated version. Yeah,
another updated version, because
sometime in the last year. Yeah,
the new Confessions of an Economic Hitman that came out in 2015. Regardless, China's kind of doing that, and they're replacing the IMF and funding these other countries. And Tom and Vince Blanchie have this cool theory that we're going to have a return to mercantilism, to where it's just they are the price setters of their commodities and their gold, and anyone else outside won't be able to set them. But if JP Morgan wants to set up a gold mining shop in China, instead of just like buying it from China, they'll go mine their own gold, but they'll abide by China's rules, and they will operate with Chinese currency over there. So it just kind of boisters the local economy of these nations. So you're just going to kind of have a return to like an America First economic plan, but for other countries. And that's kind of like the international economic cooperation that I am pro, that I was kind of talking about at the beginning of this thing. So I think that's very interesting. I don't think someone like Diamond and other cooler heads that prevail on Wall Street are all neocons that want to see the global South, die. I don't think that they all want them to be the help. I think people like Powell, who has said that there's plenty of room for more than one reserve currency in the world. I think that he is not bullshitting us when he says that. And now everybody wants to use the dollar as a weapon. And nobody benefits if the U.S. goes under. And I think that's like primarily the global South in that case. So I don't, like I said, I don't follow the economic health of China and all the other Asian countries, but I kind of think that's where they're heading. I don't know how much of a backstop Russia is providing China, but I do know that BRICS is a thing. We're having like our multipolar moment, as I think Rickards coined that. I could be wrong with that. But and the whole like China Taiwan thing, I just think this is another British neocon like operation pipe dream, where really a wet dream for them, because I mean HSBC was set up by the Brits, and all of this is the global South and some similar countries trying to maintain monetary national sovereignty from the British Empire that will die. And so raising rates is the thing that kind of brings everything back to normal. And so going to the Middle East finally, I just have the gut feeling that war in Ukraine is slowly going to die a slow, painful death. I don't follow the politics on that all the time. I don't listen to the Duran every day. A lot of it just kind of bores me. Occasionally, I'll like poke my head into the world of foreign policy. But I do know that when it comes to Israel, you basically have Zionists fighting against each other. I think that you have more like neocons want Bibi out of the picture. Ironically, I think Bibi is kind of like backed by the city of London, and because he's going rogue and going against the parliament, they're more of like a globalist sort of faction where Netanyahu isn't going rogue nationalist per se, but Tom talked about all the time where he gave a speech at the I think it was the UN, where he wanted like a pipeline starting from Russia running through Europe and going to Israel, and this would give economic independence to all these European countries, which kind of might cause them to go rogue, especially with when you have like these more like right wing factions throughout Europe, like Viktor Orban, um, Meloni in Italy. I don't think that they are all part of like, let's have this like EU thing, as so somebody like Christine Lagarde would want an EU sort of project. So it's really hard to like pin like who is with what factions. But I do know that certain people, even in our government, like you heard Pelosi say, like we want uh, Netanyahu out of the picture. It's just really interesting to think about, because I kind of agreed. And when you hear people like act like they're speaking for the dissident right and just like shitting on Netanyahu, like Zionism and like the Jews and stuff, like yeah, there's merit there. Like they're pieces of shit, but at the same time, could this work like against us? And could it be like the psyop of having like dissident right people on Twitter being like pro-war in Israel by some roundabout way? And similar to like how Assad must go in Syria, could we be psyoped into believing like Bibi must go? And is that really to our benefit? So like, I haven't really thought that theory through all the way, but it's just something to, I don't know, ponder, watch out. One thing that I've adopted from being in the Gold Ghosts and Guns world is just like, one, pay attention to psyops, but a more like poetic way to look at it is scrolling Twitter, whatever, TV, ads, radio, something's being presented in front of me. What am I looking at? Who wants me to see it? What do they want me to think about it? Why? And why now? Right? Like, you have people saying, hey, as much as you hate what's going on in Israel, maybe you shouldn't be like, pro the Palestinians or pro Hamas, because both sides suck, right? Both sides, do they have a right to defend themselves? That's arguable. Was Israel a part of Hamas doing what they did on October 7th, with how sound and secure their border was, and just like their defense tech in general? Sure. Is it all a big fake and gay false flag psyop? Yeah, probably. Have we known what these fucking people wanted since like the late 1800s? Yeah. Probably centuries before that. Regardless, it's easy for the propagandists, because they're good at what they do. And so they've played the same divide and conquer book from the get-go. So that's just something that we need to be aware of and watch out for. And the best thing that we have going for us is Powell just holding the line on tight hawkish monetary policy, and this new fusionism, these factions that are behind Trump. I don't think it's the same neocons. There's a guy on Cozy TV, Wendell on Cozy. He's actually doing a Foreign Policy Friday live stream on Cozy right now with his co-host Anglo Zoomer. Really great perspective. He kind of brings in like this Fuentes America First. I think he's like in his late 30s, 40s. I can't really tell. I've only heard his voice, but he brings in this like America First, like historical policy thing. But then it's a mix of that plus kind of what I've learned from Scott Horton, a little bit of the Duran mixed in there, and then also kind of the breaking down of the forensics of like the PayPal Mafia, the who's who, sort of like a deeper, more thorough level of what Matt Kingpilled kind of looked into with his PayPal Mafia. So he's been pretty insightful. And he lays out that there are three factions kind of backing Trump at this point. You have these Christian nationalists, and that could be made up of Catholics, Baptists, Lutherans, whatever. I would kind of throw myself into like, hey, we should have like some sort of Christian nationalism. That'd be pretty rad. And despite like if the leader in charge is a Baptist or whoever, it's still a move in the right direction if you as the left-hand kingdom of God, basically meaning the government. You have appointed by God a prince, the president, the king, the monarch, what have you. And you are passing legislation that is directly what does scripture say about this, and just interpreting it that way.
I
So
mean,
I think
as long as they're not for child mutilation and all the stuff going on you see nowadays, like that's a pretty
yeah.
low bar, but that's, I mean, kind of the way I look at that.
So you kind of have that faction. You have like the PayPal Mafia, Silicon Valley money faction, and then you have like these new crop of Zionists that aren't as Zionist and Israel first as their neocon predecessors. And so that's who's backing Trump this time. Take with that what you will. There might be some like bleeding of all three factions, like commingling with each other. But a good paper to read is from A16Z, like Silicon Valley. I forget the lady's name, but she wrote a piece called like the emergence of American dynamism. Did I say that right? Words are hard. It's late. But there are some talking points of, yeah, we need to stop using China or whoever we're outsourcing our labor to and like hiring America and just focus on America First policy and kind of taking some Curtis Yarvin talking points of getting rid of the managerial state and the inefficient bureaucracy. And it's just really refreshing to hear these kind of like, what was that? What was that book that Bitcoin maximalists like treat as their Bible? It's not the Bitcoin Standard. It is the Sovereign Individual. There's kind of essences of that, but more of like in a national frame, which I think is a much more healthy frame because the Sovereign Individual was written by like British oligarchs. So I think that's a psyop all to its own. But but yeah, I think that we're gonna see a new crop of multiple factions, like a fusionism of people running the government. Again, whoever is going to be president is going to have to make deals that favor Zionists. Unfortunately, that's been every president. We're just going to have to swallow that. But this is like a step in the right direction, and I think controlling the purse strings or the price of those purse strings is really the root of steering things in the right direction. So that wasn't very in-depth what's happening in the Middle East, but zooming out on the grand scale of things, if you make it too expensive for these bastards to fund whatever chicanery they're doing, then it's not going to last very long, is it? So that's just kind of where I'm seeing things going.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting with China is you see some of the stuff with their demographics and their economy, which I mean, people talk about the real estate there and it's all collapsing and this and that. I kind of go back and forth, but like, I'm not saying American government stats are as bad as Chinese government stats as far as the economy, but they're both pretty bad.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get a clear picture on what's going on over there. And as
I've
far
heard,
as
I've seen in Reuters, like, again, Reuters, like neocons, they hinted China might be the first to do the gold on the yield curve thing. And
well,
so,
I mean, they have been buying at the
oh yeah,
central bank level and also
every
on
central
an
bank has.
individual level, a lot of gold over the last several months. So
And you think the Fed doesn't know that? Like, I think if they want to preserve credibility, then they're going to up the ante on it and probably do monetizing gold before anyone else does, right?
yeah,
So
I mean,
it's a game of chicken. Who knows what happens? Is Powell going to send his little like COVID recording thing to Georgetown University saying, "Hey, start loving gold, kids"? I don't know, but yeah.
yeah, it'll be interesting to watch for sure. As far as the Middle East and Ukraine, like you've got two blood feuds going on in those parts of the world that have been going on for a long time, and um it's hard to get that message across to a lot of people that have a very short-sighted view of history. But you see some of the stuff going on where the U.S. is going to seize Russian assets to potentially give to Ukraine, and all this news on that. And I mean, we'll see if
Oh,
they go through
I
with
can't
that,
believe
but I think that's very short-sighted on the part of our politicians, and
I cannot believe I didn't bring that up. Yeah, I mean,
I think
talking.
that would be an interesting topic to hear your thoughts on.
Yeah, it's a credibility game, right? And so, if the U.S. sees Russia's assets, what's making China or anyone else think that, oh, if we piss off America, are they going to do that to us too? And so you might see, I don't know, hints of that, or just the idea of that happening and causing global capital flight out of the US. And that's what our traders running our government would like to have happen. But again, like on their watch, right? So I mean, it's not great, and like I know it sounds too simple, but I honestly think higher for longer fixes this, or like what forces these people making policy to like take Powell and what he's doing seriously. I don't know the answer to that, but like I know it's much more complicated than all of this, but again, it's not a good move for Powell putting the fires out, and then because even he said this after the February 20 whatever Russia invasion. Like, I guess fucking fine, it was an invasion in Ukraine, but once they like froze the assets, Powell was like, yeah, nobody really talked to the FOMC about any of this. Like, we weren't consulted on it. No one told us it was happening. So the fuck you doing, guys? So yeah, I mean, and it's the same thing with like the dot plot. You have these people working against all that Powell has fixed, and they're just like, you know, fucking up his janitorial duty of monetary policy. You know, he just waxed the floors, and some asshole just dumped a bucket of paint in the hallway.
Yeah, the I guess with all that said about current events, interest rates, what's going on with the Fed, are there any investments that or sectors that you find interesting? I know you like Bitcoin and have maybe moved away from the Bitcoin fixes this cult a little bit, but I'm sure you're still probably long
Bitcoin's the
term
only thing I
bullish.
own. Have cash if you can get it. Whatever amount of savings that you are comfortable with, put that in Bitcoin. Bitcoin's
Hmm.
probably going to double in the year that generally happens after the halving happens, which happened on 420 this year, which is hilarious. But yeah, just buy Bitcoin. Walk away with some of your Bitcoin profits, and I don't know. We were talking about offshore oil rigs and coal, and the ever continuing demand for that. after ESG and green policy. And I
Yeah,
don't want to
that's
say like commodities in general, but there's going to be, I don't like, again, I don't look at this shit, but from what Danielle said, there might be new ideas in certain private markets or deals that get made when private equity it's out of the picture. Like private equity got control of like those deals in that monopoly because the same guys that were doing the casino stuff in banking before the great financial crisis had to jump ship after Dodd-Frank and some other regulations were passed in banking, so what they can do that Wild West stuff anymore. And so they moved their shops into private equity. And so when they go under, um, deals will have to be made with private creditors and like insurance companies and others to where let's say that I don't know, like a tractor company is like out of business and an insurance company might go in and like buy an asset from them because I don't know, like it's still like performing. They just basically fill the holes on each other's balance sheets. So I don't know, like pay attention to that if you want in on that. But again, I'm not an investor. I take a very like dumbed down approach to how I see all this kind of stuff. I also don't have the money to piss away in gambling, so that's why I
yeah.
just stick with Bitcoin.
They'll keep the musical chairs going as long as they can. But
Yeah.
on Bitcoin, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. The way I kind of view it is I don't know how to value it because there's no cash flow, there's no income statement or balance sheet or stuff like that. Stuff that I look for personally, but there's also kind of the philosophical side of things where Bitcoin is kind of, I mean, it's obviously man-made, and like by definition, I think that's going to be something that has issues longer term. Whereas something like gold is kind of God's money, or commodities, stuff like that, that is um, kind of just a fact of life, the way the world was created. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on like, is there something that comes down the line and replaces Bitcoin? And what do you think of the Bitcoin ETFs getting launched this year? Is that a rug pull? Like, I don't own any Bitcoin, don't have any thoughts really on what fair value is, but it's something that I've stayed away from just because I don't feel like I have an edge in it. But be curious to hear your thoughts on the ETF and longer term, what you think
ETFs
is
are
going to
bullish
happen.
because it brings in institutional money. It makes people feel safe about Bitcoin.
But that's not that's
It's
not
a
real
way.
Bitcoin though, right? The
Uh,
way I kind of view it
it's a
is,
way for them to get exposure, but it's also a way to possibly suppress the price of Bitcoin. Um, but those are just vacant gay. What Bitcoin is like unfuckable money. Okay, this is like the former Bitcoin maximalist coming out of me. 21 million. That's it. That's all you're gonna get. Like few million have already been like burnt, lost. Um, like a sacrifice, like donation to the rest of the holders. So it's basically digital gold, very much so. Is it going to become money? Some people use it as money, Lightning Network, all these things, but again, those are second layer trust, like dependent parties. But all markets are built on trust. But Bitcoin's a commodity, like it's tokenized energy. Miners have to make contracts with either the grid or they just have to like vary all the costs that are going into power that they have to get the best rate on power. And it's basically digital gold. It is a commodity. It is here to stay. It may or may not get replaced by something better than it. I don't think that's going to happen at least in my lifetime. So it wasn't made by somebody. Yeah, God works through people. It's kind of funny how it was birthed right after the great financial crisis and people felt doomed. So, was that some like deep state psyop, or was it a few cypherpunks over the years that have practiced and played with other forms of digital money and saying, "Hey, we need to have a solution." Who is Satoshi? I think Satoshi is a decentralized group of individuals, which would be poetic because Bitcoin is a decentralized, the only truly decentralized crypto asset. So, and Nick Szabo, Adam Back, and all the other dudes probably all use their ideas of, electronic cash, and they took what worked and applied it to Bitcoin and left out what didn't work. And that's how Bitcoin is awesome and what it is. So, I mean, I can just point to people to read the Bitcoin Standard. There's tons of resources out there. Like, if you haven't bought Bitcoin and you felt like you've shot yourself in the dick, well, you're only shooting yourself in the dick even more by not fucking buying it. Like, it's still here. People are actually taking this shit seriously, like on CNBC. Like, this thing isn't going anywhere. Jerome Powell doesn't have a problem with Bitcoin. He has a problem with like other cryptos and Ponzi schemes and stable coins. That's why I'm sure like him and the Treasury and FDIC made it so that all these banks had the capability of managing like stable coins. This thing's real. It's not better than gold. Not as good as gold. It's a different animal, but it is probably on the same throne as gold, I would say. So that's not like the best answer. It's unfuckable. Yes, maybe somebody is behind it, but they don't have any incentive to like come out and reveal themselves, other than if they're like a Fed. I'm not putting that past me. It's very possible, but again, I think it's a group of individuals that made it. It's money that you can store in your head. If you memorize your seed phrase, it's fucking yours. Your life savings can literally be in your head. You can access any wallet that you download on your app, put in your seed phrase. Oh, look, there's my money. I can send it to anywhere in the world, anytime. I can walk across the border of Mexico stark ass naked with my life value in my head. It's that powerful. You weren't able to ever do that until Bitcoin came around. Yeah, I don't think anybody really has the incentive. I mean, all the institutional money that's gone into and invested into Bitcoin, like what I really don't think even the creator of Bitcoin, even if they're like a bad actor, they don't have a reason to just send it all to zero. I don't think that it's going to be like the great like wealth. What's that stupid fucking theory? That some guy came up with, like the great taking. Is that what it is? The great taking.
Yeah, is it
Like all the banks are in on it and they're gonna like steal everybody's money. Like that's fucking Whitney Webb retarded bullshit. That's not happening.
I
And
think
that's
that's
not what
highly
Bitcoin.
unlikely. Yeah. But
So I don't know. Like, do your own research. Like, you already know I'm not fucking licensed, whatever. But I am this interested in macro and finance as I am because of stuff like Bitcoin, because of COVID, and because like I felt it, everyone felt it. Everyone started to ask, what the hell is going on? How does this work? What is this plumbing? Where does money come from? So I don't know. I think if you ask yourself enough questions, read a few books, some articles, like sure, they're probably biased, so take that with a grain of salt. But if you can rub two brain cells together, then you can probably figure out you should probably fucking own some Bitcoin. You don't need to self custody it yourself, but there are great solutions like you have multi-sig, which is basically take your Bitcoin, safe deposit box version of Bitcoin. You have a key, the bank holds a key, a third party, your lawyer holds a key. They do that for you. Unchained Capital. Love those guys. Go to their meetups often in Austin. Arguably the Bitcoin capital of the world. This shit's out there. People are taking it seriously all over the world. So you're just you're not doing yourselves any favors if you're just, sitting on your hands. Look into
so
it.
here's a question on Bitcoin before we start to wrap up here. If I say want to dollar cost average into Bitcoin, and the way I kind of view it is like I'm not interested in ETFs, I'm not interested in all that stuff. Like I want to hold, basically own it myself. Like I said, all right, $10 a week, I can afford to throw it away and forget about it if it doesn't work out. But are there platforms that you would look at as far as dollar cost averaging into it, where it's something where, okay, $10 a week, I can just basically set this on a recurring transfer. And that's one of the things I've been thinking about a little bit recently, where it's not going to be a huge part of my portfolio, but something where I've been giving it more thought in recent months. So,
yeah, man. I would choose Bitcoin only platforms as much. Actually, there's really only one place to buy Bitcoin. Okay, a few. River.com. Okay, they're Bitcoin only. Don't go to any other Bitcoin only companies. I don't fucking care what your argument is. I don't care who you are. Go to River and only River. Okay. They build their tech stack in-house. They have their own servers. Alex Leishman and the team, kick-ass, solid dudes. They actually have gone through the grunt work to get bank charters in multiple states. I think the majority of them. So start there. Now, they cater to high net worth individuals. So their fee, their spread might be high. It's worth it. Okay.
Is that Marty Bent and that? Is he involved
River
with
is
them?
sponsored Marty Bent. Also, you can go to Unchained Capital. If you just have a lump sum, honestly, I don't see Bitcoin going back down to 50K. Could be wrong. So if I'm wrong, don't come bitching to Phil. Okay. But if you have a lump sum of cash, wondering what to do, you don't have to take all of your lump sum of cash, but you could also go to Unchained Capital. They can set you up. They have an OTC desk. So I don't know like really what the rate is, how much like they can get it in bulk for you. I don't know if that's more cost efficient, but look into that. They also sponsor TFTC, Marty Bent's show. And then you can also do Coinbase Pro because I think that's like the cheapest way to go about it. And honestly, even if you're a boomer or a late Gen Xer, it's not difficult to figure out self-custody. There are plenty of resources out there to figure it out and to not fuck it up. I would not recommend doing multi-sig to all people. It's not for everybody. I don't do it. Multi-sig is basically you take your seed phrase, your key, your password. You don't need to memorize it, but you need to write it down and not fucking lose it. And what multi-sig basically does is it helps create redundancy, like as a protectionary thing. It's the safe deposit box method. So they take your seed phrase, your password, break it up into 3, or you can do like 2 of 3, 3 of 5, 10 of 12, whatever the fuck you want to do. But it's not for everybody. It gets very complicated. Just save your password, your seed phrase somewhere. Don't lose it. BTC Sessions. He's got all these great tutorials on YouTube. Great guy. He's been on my show. I met him a couple times. Swell dude. He is your go-to of how to Bitcoin literally everything. So the best thing about Bitcoin is it is a bearer asset that you can store in your head, your life value in your head. So like if you don't get anything about Bitcoin, like at least get that part.
Yeah.
That's why it's freedom money. That is like why that is you are literally your own bank. Like that is your monetary self-sovereignty to the max. And this is why Bitcoin maximalists are Bitcoin maximalists, because not only is it that, but it's decentralized and like you don't need to worry about people debasing it. Price of Bitcoin goes up and down, but you like look at a overtime chart of what Bitcoin does. So I hope I sold Bitcoin enough. So you got River.com, Unchained Capital, and Coinbase Pro. Coinbase Pro is going to go to your Coinbase account. You can withdraw it to your own personal wallet, set up your personal wallet, and don't lose your seed phrase.
Yeah,
write down somewhere, put it in a safe deposit box, put it in your vault. Actually, don't do safe deposit box because they're paying the ass. I work at a bank, and I think most banks are not issuing any more safe deposit boxes because they're a liability. They're paying the ass, and I think some of them are actually getting removed from certain branches. So anyway, but yeah, that's Bitcoin. Look more into it. Hope I sold you on it.
Yeah, I'll have to do some more research. I'm not not
And you don't
religious
need to
on
put all your eggs
any
in one
asset,
basket too. Like, have some
but
Bitcoin, have some gold, have your investments, what you think's gonna do great. But, like, I hate to be a dick here, but you're a fucking idiot if you don't own some Bitcoin.
yeah.
Like, that's not to just you, that's to everybody. Like, it's been around here for a while and people are getting interested in it. Why?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to take the approach of better late than never, and I think that's the case with a lot of investments. But I guess in wrapping up here, I figured I'd come up with a closing question for all the guests I have on, and what I came up with was the question: what book should I add to my reading list? Like, could be finance, investments,
Oh man.
history. What do you think I should add to the reading list?
Man, that's not fair. It's not fair. But okay, so scrolling through my books, I mean, it's a cliche, but The Creature from Jekyll Island, but it does get retarded in some cases. So to throw in some nuance, maybe Fed Up by Danielle DiMartino Booth. Um, looking through here.
All right, no more than 3 though. My book list is already plenty long, so I can't add too many.
The House of Morgan. It's kind of cool.
I have that book already. I haven't gotten around to reading it, so maybe I'll bump that
It's
towards the top of the list. So,
it's kind of a bummer, man. Like, it's just stale. Like, there's a lot of great information. It breaks up the nuances of like the House of Morgan, and this kind of like bolsters the argument that like it's not all one big club and we ain't in it. Like, there are competing factions in these institutions. Like, you got the City of London branch, you got the Wall Street branch, and um, I don't know. There's a lot of names and like details and shit and dates. So that's kind of like a drag. I'm gonna throw one that's completely irrelevant. The Kingkiller Chronicles. It's just a fantasy. It's
okay.
not related to any of this at all. Um, this the author Patrick Rothfuss has promised the third book for like, I don't know, 20 years, and it's not out yet.
Wow.
But Stephen King's done that, and some other fiction people have like put out books for, and they still did great. But that's a good one. So
Yeah. Well,
the name of
if I ever get caught up on my reading list, I'll get around to that. But
yeah, just the prose of it's really cool. The first book is called The Name of the Wind, and of course there's a like wiki fiction on all this shit. But The Name of the Wind, and then The Wise Man's Fear is the second one. I think
all
that
right.
The Wise Man's Fear is a much better book to
Well, I'll
that.
have
And
to
fingers crossed, the third one comes out in like next year, but it probably won't. But
yeah,
yeah,
I'll
that's my
have
story. I'm
to
sticking to it. Oh, Putinomics. I didn't get through all of it. That one's also kind of dry to listen to. But if you want to figure out like how Putin turned his economy around after once he got in charge, kind of like a great man thing, like we kind of hope happens in America. I'm of the opinion that democracy kind of fucking sucks, and we're done with the American project and the experiment in the Constitution is fake and gay, because we just added more globalist oligarch shit on top of it. And so we basically need a monarch to get rid of this managerial state. Totalitarianism is great if it's the totalitarianism that you agree with.
yeah,
So I think
if you do
we're
end up with
heading,
a benevolent dictator, I think
yeah.
that's the way to go.
And it's
So,
not Trump. Trump is a fucking boob. Like, he's a good step in the right direction with the people that are backing him. We'll see what the hell happens. We'll fuck around and find out with this election. I do think that Trump, it's been agreed from both sides of the within the deep state that, hey, Trump is our guy. I like Curtis Yarvin's idea of, hey, we couldn't let Trump have a second term in a row because the world just wasn't ready for that with the summer of George Floyd and all this shit. They would have freaked out. So we needed to see how corrupt and corroded the system really was under Biden by pulling that shit back. And so now even people within Silicon Valley and all the people that we think are our enemy are kind of, I think to some extent they're normies because they just go about their CEO positions and whatever politics stuff. I don't think they really see all of it. And I think that they needed to have the veil lifted to see how bad it really was. So they're going to
yeah.
come in with their own sort of like neo uh, nationalist, whatever it's going to be. But we would probably be better under like a king. But we'll see. Democracy, I think, for the U.S. is on its way out. So whatever happens after that, hopefully it's Christian nationalism, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to watch. I think America's overdue for a great man. I'm optimistic we get him in our lifetime, but we'll have to wait and see on that. I think this year and this election is going to be very interesting to watch. So
Very.
I think on that note, we'll be wrapping up episode 2. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, y'all.